The blood-red sun was setting over Telluride, Colorado, when Olivia Evans first laid eyes on the man who would change her life forever. It was 1883, and the small mining town nestled in the San Juan Mountains was no place for a widow with a young son. But Olivia had nowhere else to go after her husband. Thomas died in a mine collapse 3 years prior. At 25, she had already experienced more heartache than most, but for her 6-year-old son Samuel's sake, she kept her chin up and trudged forward through life's hardships. Olivia wiped her hands on her apron as she watched through the window of Mrs. Holloway's boarding house, where she worked as a cook and housekeeper. A tall stranger rode into town on a magnificent chestnut stallion, his silhouette sharp against the fading light. There was something about his posture, straight-backed but relaxed in the saddle, that caught her attention. His face was obscured by the wide brim of his Stetson, but she could tell he was scanning the main street with a careful eye. "Mama, I'm hungry." Samuel tugged at her skirt, breaking her trance. "Dinner will be ready soon, darling," Olivia said, tearing her gaze away from the window to smile at her son. His mop of brown hair needed cutting, and his cheeks still held the baby roundness that made her heart ache with love. "Go wash up now." As Samuel scampered away, Olivia returned to her cooking, but her mind kept drifting to the mysterious rider. New men came to Telluride regularly, drawn by silver and opportunity, but something about this one felt different. "Mrs. Evans, Mrs. Holloway called from the front parlor. "We've got a new boarder. Can you prepare an extra plate for dinner?" Olivia's heart quickened as she heard heavy boots on the wooden floor, and then he was there, filling the doorway to her kitchen. He was even taller up close, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders under a dusty leather vest. When he removed his hat, she saw a face weathered by sun and wind, but still youthful, perhaps 30 years of age. His eyes were the clear blue of a mountain lake, and his dark blonde hair fell in waves to his collar. "Madam," he nodded respectfully. "Name's Zachary Blackburn. Hope I'm not causing you any trouble by arriving at the dinner hour." "No trouble at all, Mr. Blackburn," Olivia replied, finding her voice despite the strange flutter in her chest. "We always make plenty. Appreciate it." His voice was deep but gentle, with a hint of a southern drawl, as he turned to follow Mrs. Holloway to his room. Olivia noticed the worn gun belt at his hip and the slight limp in his step. That night at dinner, Samuel couldn't take his eyes off Zachary. The boy had never been so quiet during a meal, watching in fascination as the tall cowboy cut his meat with precise movements and answered Mrs. Holloway's questions about his travels with polite brevity. "What brings you to Telluride, Mr. Blackburn?" the elderly landlady asked, passing him a basket of biscuits. "Looking for honest work," Zachary replied. "I've done my share of ranching and riding for various outfits across Texas and New Mexico. Heard there might be opportunities here." "The Silver Bell Mine is always hiring," said Mr. Porter, a middle-aged clerk who'd been staying at the boarding house for nearly a year. "Though it's dangerous work, as many here know all too well." Olivia felt a pang at the mention of mining. She kept her eyes down, focusing on helping Samuel cut his potatoes into smaller pieces. "Mining's not for me," Zachary said, and something in his tone made Olivia look up. Their eyes met briefly before he continued. "I prefer working under the open sky." "The Chambers Ranch outside town might be hiring," Olivia found herself saying. "Mr. Chambers mentioned to Mrs. Holloway last week that he lost 2 hands to the silver fever." Zachary's smile transformed his face, softening the hard lines around his mouth. "I appreciate the tip, Mrs. Evans." After dinner, while Olivia was washing dishes, Samuel slipped back into the kitchen instead of doing his reading exercises as instructed. "Mama, "Is Mr. Blackburn going to stay here long?" he asked, climbing onto a stool to watch her work. "I don't know, dear. That's his business." "I hope he stays," Samuel said with the unfiltered honesty of childhood. "He looks like he could fight bears." Olivia laughed despite herself. "Fighting bears isn't a proper occupation, Samuel. Now, off to your studies before bedtime." Later that evening, as Olivia sat on the edge of Samuel's bed, listening to his prayers, her son asked a question that made her blood run cold. "Mama, why don't I have a papa like the other boys?" Olivia stroked his hair, choosing her words carefully. "You did have a papa, Samuel. He was a good, brave man who loved you very much, but God called him to heaven when you were very small." "I don't remember him," Samuel said, his small face scrunched in concentration. "I know, darling, but I remember enough for both of us." She kissed his forehead. "Your father would be very proud of you." As she blew out the lamp and left his room, Olivia found Zachary Blackburn sitting in the parlor, a book open on his knee. He rose when she entered, that old-fashioned courtesy making her smile despite her melancholy. "Your boy seems like a fine young man," Zachary said. "Thank you. I'm doing my best to raise him right. It can't be easy on your own." Olivia stiffened slightly. "We manage." Zachary nodded, seeming to understand he'd touched on a sensitive subject. "I'll be heading to the Chambers Ranch tomorrow. Thank you again for the recommendation." "You're welcome, Mr. Blackburn. Good night." As Olivia climbed the stairs to her small room, she couldn't help but wonder about the mysterious cowboy with the kind eyes and the hint of sadness that seemed to shadow him, much like her own. In the morning, Zachary was gone before breakfast, his absence somehow leaving the boarding house feeling emptier than it had been before his arrival. Olivia told herself it was foolish to feel disappointed. He was just another drifter passing through their lives. The next day brought the start of the school term, and Samuel was both excited and nervous as Olivia walked him to the small schoolhouse on the edge of town. At 6, he was starting his formal education, and Olivia had spent the previous evening making sure his clothes were clean and mended, his lunch pail filled with bread and apple slices, and his slate free from cracks. "Remember to mind your manners and listen to Miss Wilson," Olivia instructed as they approached the white clapboard building where a dozen or so children were already playing in the yard. "I will, Mama," Samuel promised, his small hand gripping hers tightly. Miss Wilson, a young woman who had come from Boston the previous year to teach in the frontier town, greeted them warmly. "Welcome, Samuel. We're pleased to have you join us." Samuel's smile was tentative but brave as he let go of Olivia's hand. She watched him walk into the schoolhouse, her heart swelling with pride and that bittersweet ache all mothers feel when their children take steps toward independence. The day passed quickly at the boarding house, with linens to wash and meals to prepare. Olivia was kneading dough for the evening bread when Mrs. Holloway appeared in the kitchen doorway, her expression troubled. "Olivia, dear, you'd better come. It's Samuel." Fear gripped Olivia's heart as she hurriedly wiped her flour-covered hands. "What's happened? Is he hurt?" "Not hurt, but upset. Miss Wilson brought him back early." Olivia rushed to the parlor to find her son sitting on the sofa, his face streaked with tears, his new slate cracked on the floor beside him. Miss Wilson stood nearby, her expression sympathetic. "Samuel, what's wrong?" Olivia knelt before him, checking for injuries. Samuel threw himself into her arms, sobbing against her shoulder. Miss Wilson stepped forward hesitantly. "There was an incident during recess, Mrs. Evans. Some of the older boys were unkind." "Unkind how?" Olivia asked, her arms tightening around Samuel's shaking form. Miss Wilson lowered her voice. "They teased him about not having a father, called him fatherless. One boy pushed him and his slate broke when it fell." I've disciplined the children responsible, but Samuel was so upset I thought it best to bring him home." Hot anger flashed through Olivia, followed by a wave of helpless sadness. She'd known this might happen eventually, but she'd hoped the children of Telluride would be kinder, or that Samuel would be older and better equipped to handle such cruelty. "Thank you for bringing him home, Miss Wilson," Olivia said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "He'll return tomorrow." After the teacher left, Olivia held Samuel until his sobs quieted. "Those boys were wrong to say those things," she told him fiercely. "You are not fatherless. Your father was Thomas Evans, and he would be so proud of the brave boy you are." "But he's not here," Samuel hiccuped. "Billy Thornton said a boy without a papa is nobody at all." "Billy Thornton is wrong," Olivia said, wiping Samuel's tears with her apron. "You are somebody very important. You're my son, and you're your father's son, even if he's watching over you from heaven instead of here on earth." That night, after Samuel had finally fallen asleep, Olivia sat by her bedroom window, looking out at the stars that hung like diamonds over the jagged mountain peaks. She allowed herself to cry then, silent tears for the husband she'd lost, and the son who felt his absence so keenly. The next morning, Olivia walked Samuel back to school, ignoring his pleas to stay home. "We don't run from our troubles," she told him, though her heart ached at sending him back to face his tormentors. "We stand tall and show them we're strong." She watched him enter the schoolyard, his shoulders slumped but his chin up, just as she'd taught him. As she turned to leave, she spotted a familiar figure approaching on horseback, Zachary Blackburn, looking trail-worn but somehow more at home in Telluride than he had 2 days ago. "Mrs. Evans," he called, tipping his hat as he reined his horse to a stop beside her. "Mr. Blackburn, did you find work at the Chambers Ranch?" "I did indeed. Mr. Chambers hired me on as a foreman, seeing as I've had experience running cattle operations before." He glanced toward the schoolhouse. "Your boy starting school?" Olivia nodded, not trusting her voice. Something about Zachary's steady presence made her want to unburden herself, a dangerous feeling for a woman who'd learned to depend only on herself. Zachary seemed to sense her distress. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Evans?" Before she could respond, a commotion from the schoolyard caught their attention. Samuel's voice, higher and more frightened than she'd ever heard it, carried across the distance. "I do have a father. He's in heaven." Olivia was already moving, with Zachary close behind, having quickly dismounted and tied his horse to a nearby post. They reached the schoolyard to find Samuel surrounded by 3 older boys, the largest of whom, Billy Thornton, she presumed was poking Samuel in the chest. "Heaven ain't real, and neither was your pa," the bully sneered. "My pa says your ma never even had a husband, that you're just that's enough." Zachary's voice cracked like a whip, silencing the boy mid-sentence. All heads turned toward the tall cowboy, whose presence suddenly seemed to fill the schoolyard. He walked forward with that slight limp, but there was nothing weak about the way he moved, nothing uncertain in his gaze as he assessed the situation. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone deceptively calm. The bullies shuffled their feet, suddenly interested in the dirt beneath their boots. Samuel, however, looked up at Zachary with a mixture of awe and relief. "These boys were saying I don't have a father," Samuel said, his voice small but steady. Zachary looked at the bullies, his blue eyes hard as flint. "Is that so?" Billy Thornton, emboldened perhaps by having his friends beside him, lifted his chin defiantly. "It's the truth. Everyone knows it. He's fatherless." The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Olivia started forward, ready to defend her son, but Zachary's next words stopped her cold. "He has a father now." A hush fell over the schoolyard. Olivia stared at Zachary, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. The cowboy dropped to one knee beside Samuel, putting himself at the boy's eye level. "My name is Zachary Blackburn," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "I'm a foreman at the Chambers Ranch, and I'm a friend to Samuel and his mother. Any boy who has a problem with Samuel will answer to me." "Is that clear?" The bullies nodded, wide-eyed at the authority in Zachary's voice and the implicit threat behind his words. Even Billy Thornton seemed to shrink a little. "Now apologize to Samuel," Zachary continued, "and then get on to your lessons before I have a word with your parents about your behavior." "Sorry, Samuel," the boys mumbled in unison before scurrying away toward the schoolhouse. Zachary turned to Samuel, whose expression had transformed from misery to wonder. "You all right, partner?" Samuel nodded, a tentative smile appearing. "Yes, sir. Good man. Don't let those boys bother you. They're just jealous because you've got the smartest, kindest mother in all of Colorado." Samuel's smile widened as he looked at Olivia, who stood frozen, uncertain how to respond to what had just happened. Zachary rose to his feet, suddenly looking a bit uncomfortable, as if he'd only just realized the implications of his words. "Mrs. Evans, I hope I didn't overstep," he said quietly. "I couldn't stand by and watch them treat your boy that way." Before Olivia could respond, the school bell rang, and Miss Wilson appeared at the door, calling the children inside. Samuel hesitated, looking between his mother and Zachary. "Go on," Olivia encouraged, finding her voice at last. "We'll talk more after school." Samuel nodded, then surprised them both by throwing his arms around Zachary's waist in a quick hug before running toward the schoolhouse. Olivia watched him go, relief and confusion warring within her. "Mr. Blackburn," she began once Samuel was inside, "I appreciate your intervention, but—" "I know what you're going to say," Zachary interrupted gently. "And you're right. I had no business making such a declaration. I can only say that seeing your boy in distress, well, it touched something in me." "You don't even know us," Olivia said, though there was no anger in her voice, only bewilderment. "I'd like to, if you'll permit it." The sincerity in his blue eyes made her breath catch. "I meant what I said about being a friend to you and Samuel. The rest, well, that was perhaps presumptuous of me." Olivia didn't know what to say. This man, this stranger who had ridden into their lives mere days ago, had just publicly aligned himself with her son, with her family. It was improper, impulsive, and yet part of her was grateful for his fierce defense of Samuel. "I should get back to the boarding house," she said finally. "Mrs. Holloway will be wondering where I am." "Of course." Zachary nodded, retrieving his horse's reins. "I'll be staying at the ranch bunkhouse now, but I'd like to call on you and Samuel sometime, if that's acceptable." Olivia hesitated, then nodded. "Sunday, after church, we could walk by the river if the weather is fair." The smile that spread across Zachary's face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "I'd like that very much, Mrs. Evans." As Olivia walked back to the boarding house, her mind was in turmoil. Zachary Blackburn was a stranger, a drifter who had ridden into town just days ago. She knew nothing about him beyond what he'd chosen to share. And yet, he'd shown more kindness to Samuel in one encounter than many long-time Telluride residents had in years. That afternoon, when Samuel returned from school, he was bursting with excitement. "Mama, everyone was being nice to me today. Billy Thornton even shared his lunch apple with me." "That's wonderful, dear," Olivia said, though she wondered how much of this newfound popularity was genuine and how much was due to fear of the tall cowboy who had claimed a connection to her son. "Is Mr. Blackburn really going to be my new father?" Samuel asked, his eyes shining with hope. Olivia's heart clenched. "No, Samuel. Mr. Blackburn was just being kind, standing up for you against those bullies." Samuel's face fell, and Olivia hurried to soften the blow. "But he is our friend, and he'd like to join us for a walk on Sunday after church." "Really?" The joy that lit up Samuel's face made Olivia wonder if she'd made a mistake in allowing Zachary into their lives, however peripherally. She didn't want Samuel to become attached to yet another person who might disappear. As the days passed, Olivia found herself thinking about Zachary more often than she cared to admit. She wondered about his past, about what had brought him to Telluride, about the slight limp he tried to disguise. She told herself it was merely curiosity about a man who had inserted himself into her family's affairs. But in her most honest moments, she acknowledged the flutter in her stomach when she thought of his blue eyes and gentle voice. Sunday arrived bright and clear, the aspens on the surrounding mountainsides just beginning to show hints of gold among their green leaves. Olivia wore her best dress, a modest blue calico that brought out the hazel in her eyes, and made sure Samuel's hair was neatly combed before they headed to the small white church in the center of town. Zachary was already there when they arrived, standing somewhat awkwardly outside, his hat in his hands. He'd clearly made an effort with his appearance. His hair was trimmed, his face freshly shaved, and he wore a clean white shirt under a dark vest that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. "Mrs. Evans, Samuel," he greeted them, a smile warming his features. "It's good to see you both." Samuel beamed up at him. "We're going for a walk after church." "I'm looking forward to it," Zachary said, his eyes meeting Olivia's over Samuel's head. The service passed in a blur for Olivia, who was acutely aware of Zachary sitting in the pew behind them, his deep voice joining in the hymns with surprising clarity. She noticed several townspeople watching them with curious eyes, no doubt wondering about the connection between the widow Evans and the new ranch foreman. Telluride was small enough that gossip spread quickly, and she knew the scene at the schoolyard had already been discussed in every home and shop in town. After the service, they walked together toward the San Miguel River, which ran clear and cold through the valley. Samuel ran ahead, throwing stones into the water and watching the ripples spread. "He seems happier," Zachary observed. "Yes, no more trouble at school thanks to you." Olivia paused, then added, "Though I do worry about what will happen when you move on." Zachary gave her a long look. "What makes you think I'm moving on?" "Men like you usually do, men like me." There was a hint of amusement in his voice. "Drifters, cowboys, men who don't stay in one place for long." Zachary stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "Mrs. Evans, Olivia, if I may, I've been drifting for 5 years now. Ever since the war took my brother and my parents died of influenza within months of each other. I came to Telluride looking for a place to stop drifting." Olivia was struck by the raw honesty in his voice. "I'm sorry about your family," she said softly. "As I am about your husband," he replied. "Samuel talks about him sometimes, or rather about the absence of him. He's a fine boy. You've done well by him." "I've tried." Olivia watched her son, who was now attempting to build a small dam out of stones. "It hasn't been easy. Few worthwhile things are." Zachary hesitated, then said, "I hope you know I meant no disrespect at the schoolyard. I spoke without thinking, but seeing that boy hurt Samuel, I couldn't stand by and do nothing." "I understand," Olivia said, "and I'm grateful, truly. Samuel has had a difficult time being without a father. The other children don't understand." "Children can be cruel without meaning to be," Zachary agreed. "I remember when my brother and I first went to school after our mother died. The things the other children said." He trailed off, and Olivia felt a connection between them, a shared understanding of loss that went beyond words. They walked in companionable silence for a while, watching Samuel play. "May I ask how your husband died?" Zachary finally asked, the Silver Bell Mine. There was a collapse. Even after 3 years, the words still hurt to say. 23 men were lost that day. Thomas was one of them. Zachary's face darkened. I'm sorry. Mining is dangerous work. Is that why you prefer to work under the open sky? Olivia asked, remembering his words from their first meeting. A shadow passed over Zachary's face. Partly. I worked in a coal mine once back in Kentucky. Got caught in a partial collapse. That's where the limp comes from. My leg was crushed. I was lucky to keep it. I didn't mean to pry, Olivia said quickly. You didn't. It's only fair you know something about me since I've thrust myself into your family's affairs. He smiled, the warmth returning to his eyes. Besides, I find I want you to know me, Olivia Evans. The way he said her name sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cool mountain air. Olivia looked away, suddenly flustered. Samuel, she called, don't go too far. They spent the afternoon by the river, talking and watching Samuel play. Zachary told stories of his travels across the West, of cattle drives in Texas and ranch work in Wyoming. Olivia shared memories of growing up in Missouri before coming to Colorado with Thomas after their wedding. It was the most pleasant afternoon Olivia had experienced in years, and when it was time to return to town, she felt a pang of regret. Can Mr. Blackburn come to dinner? Samuel asked as they approached the boarding house. I wouldn't want to impose, Zachary said quickly. It's no imposition, Olivia found herself saying. Mrs. Holloway always makes extra on Sundays. There's plenty for one more. Mrs. Holloway, a shrewd woman with a kind heart, raised an eyebrow when Olivia brought Zachary into the boarding house but said nothing beyond a polite welcome. Throughout dinner, Olivia was aware of the other boarders watching them with interest, particularly Mr. Porter, whose eyes narrowed every time Zachary made Samuel laugh. After the meal, as Olivia cleared the dishes, Mr. Porter cornered her in the kitchen. Mrs. Evans, I feel I should warn you as a friend, he said in a low voice. That cowboy is taking a particular interest in your boy and in you. Mr. Blackburn has been kind to us, Olivia replied stiffly. Perhaps too kind, Porter insisted. No one knows anything about him. He rode into town less than a week ago. For all we know, he could be running from the law. That's quite an accusation, Mr. Porter, Olivia said, her hands stilling on the dish she was washing. Do you have any reason to think such a thing? Porter hesitated. No specific reason, no. But a woman in your position must be careful. You have your reputation to consider and your son's welfare. I appreciate your concern, Olivia said, though in truth, she was annoyed by his interference. But I believe I can judge Mr. Blackburn's character for myself. When she returned to the parlor, Zachary was sitting on the floor with Samuel, examining the boy's collection of polished stones found in the riverbed. The sight of the tall cowboy, his long legs folded awkwardly beneath him as he listened with genuine interest to Samuel's excited explanations, made something warm unfurl in Olivia's chest. It's getting late, she said reluctantly. Samuel needs to prepare for bed. Zachary rose smoothly despite his bad leg. Of course. Thank you for a wonderful day, Mrs. Evans, and for dinner. Can Mr. Blackburn come again next Sunday? Samuel asked, his eyes pleading. Olivia hesitated, aware of Mr. Porter watching from the doorway. We'll see, Samuel. Mr. Blackburn is busy with his work at the ranch. I have Sundays free, Zachary said, his eyes holding hers, and I can't think of a better way to spend them. After Zachary left, Olivia tucked Samuel into bed, her mind swirling with conflicting emotions. She was drawn to Zachary in a way she hadn't been drawn to any man since Thomas, but she was also wary. She had Samuel to think of, and a life carefully constructed around her independence. Mama, Samuel said as she leaned down to kiss his forehead, I like Mr. Blackburn. I know you do, sweetheart. You like him too. Olivia smoothed his hair back from his forehead. He seems to be a good man. He makes you smile, Samuel observed with the innocent perception of childhood. You don't smile much except at me. Olivia's heart constricted. She hadn't realized Samuel had noticed her sadness, had thought she'd hidden it better for his sake. I smile plenty, she protested gently. Not like today, Samuel insisted, yawning. Today you smiled with your eyes too. As the autumn progressed, Zachary became a regular visitor at the boarding house. Every Sunday, he would join Olivia and Samuel for church, and then spend the afternoon with them. Sometimes they walked by the river. Other times, when the weather was poor, they stayed in the boarding house parlor, playing checkers or reading. Zachary, it turned out, had a fine reading voice, and he enthralled Samuel with tales from Olivia's small collection of books. Despite Mr. Porter's warnings, Olivia found herself looking forward to these Sundays with increasing anticipation. Zachary was unlike any man she'd known, steady and reliable, yet with a quiet intensity that made her pulse quicken when their eyes met. He treated Samuel with a mixture of respect and playfulness that the boy clearly adored, and he never overstepped the boundaries Olivia had set, always maintaining a proper distance, despite the growing warmth between them. October brought the first snow to Telluride, dusting the mountains with white and sending a chill through the valley. On a crisp Saturday morning, Olivia was startled by a commotion outside the boarding house, the sound of horses and men's voices raised in excitement. Mrs. Holloway burst into the kitchen, her face alight with news. They've caught them, the Anderson gang. They tried to rob the bank in Montrose, but the sheriff's posse caught up with them on the way here. Olivia's heart raced. The Anderson gang had been terrorizing southwestern Colorado for months, robbing banks and stage coaches, leaving dead bodies in their wake. Everyone in Telluride had been on edge, knowing the prosperous mining town might be their next target. Are they bringing them here? Olivia asked, wiping her hands on her apron. Yes, to the jail until the federal marshal can collect them, Mrs. Holloway replied. The whole town's turning out to see them brought in. Where's Samuel? Playing upstairs. I should let him be for now, Mrs. Holloway advised. No need for the boy to see such rough men. But you and I might step out for a moment, just to see justice being done. Curiosity got the better of Olivia, and after checking that Samuel was contentedly playing with his wooden soldiers, she joined Mrs. Holloway and several of the boarders on the front porch. A crowd had gathered in the street, watching as the sheriff's posse rode in with 4 men bound and slumped over their saddles. As they passed the boarding house, one of the prisoners looked up, his face bruised and bloody but his eyes defiant. Olivia gasped, taking an involuntary step back. The man's gaze locked with hers for a moment before the posse moved on toward the small jailhouse at the end of the street. Did you see them? Mrs. Holloway asked excitedly. Vicious-looking brutes, weren't they? Thank the Lord they've been caught before they could bring their wickedness to our town. Olivia nodded absently, her mind still on the prisoner's face so familiar, yet she couldn't place where she might have seen him before. That evening, when Zachary arrived for his usual Sunday visit a day early, his face was grim. I heard about the Anderson gang being captured, Olivia said after Samuel had been sent to wash up for dinner. That's why I came today, Zachary replied, his voice low. Olivia, there's something I need to tell you, something about my past. A cold dread settled in Olivia's stomach. What is it? The leader of that gang, Ellie Anderson, I know him. Zachary's blue eyes were troubled. He and I rode together years ago before he turned to outlawing. I wanted you to hear it from me before the gossip starts. You were friends with an outlaw. Olivia whispered, the image of the defiant prisoner flashing in her mind. "We were ranch hands together in Texas," Zachary explained. "I haven't seen him in 5 years, not since he started gathering men for his gang. I refused to join him and we parted ways. But people will talk when they realize the connection." Olivia studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I care about you and Samuel," Zachary said simply. "I don't want you to be blindsided by rumors, and I don't want you to think I kept secrets from you." Before Olivia could respond, Samuel came bounding back into the room, his face freshly scrubbed and his hair slicked down with water. "Mr. Blackburn, you came early." Zachary's expression transformed, the worry vanishing behind a warm smile. "I sure did, partner. Couldn't wait until tomorrow to see you and your ma." Throughout dinner, Olivia was distracted, turning Zachary's revelation over in her mind. She believed him when he said he had no part in Anderson's crimes. Everything she had seen of Zachary's character spoke of honor and integrity. But would others believe it? Would Samuel suffer new taunts at school because of their association with a man who had once been friends with a notorious outlaw? After Samuel was in bed, Olivia joined Zachary on the boarding house porch, despite the cold. She wrapped her shawl tightly around her shoulders as they sat side by side on the wooden bench, watching their breath form clouds in the frosty air. "Will the sheriff question you about Anderson?" she asked. "Probably," Zachary admitted. "I plan to go to him first thing tomorrow, tell him what I know, which isn't much after all these years. And then I keep working at the Chambers Ranch, keep coming to see you and Samuel on Sundays if you'll allow it." Zachary turned to face her, his expression earnest. "Olivia, I need you to know that the man I was when I rode with Illy Anderson isn't the man I am now. I've made mistakes, but I've never broken the law, never hurt anyone who didn't deserve hurting." "The way you defended Samuel," Olivia said slowly, "that wasn't the first time you've stood up for someone who needed it, was it?" A shadow crossed Zachary's face. "No, it wasn't." "Is that how you got the limp? Not from a mind collapse?" Zachary was silent for a long moment. "You're perceptive, Olivia Evans. The limp is from a bullet. I took it defending a woman from her abusive husband back in New Mexico. I didn't lie about working in mines, though. That came earlier." Olivia absorbed this information, trying to reconcile it with the gentle man who read stories to her son and helped Mrs. Holloway carry firewood without being asked. "You've lived a dangerous life." "I've lived a life," Zachary corrected, "with good parts and bad like anyone else. But I've always tried to do right, even when it cost me." He hesitated, then added softly, "I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you and Samuel. Never wanted to stay in one place, build something lasting until now." The confession hung in the air between them, more intimate than any touch could have been. Olivia's heart pounded against her ribs as she met his gaze. "Zachary." The door opened behind them and Mrs. Holloway appeared, bundled in her dressing gown. "Olivia, dear, it's freezing out here. You'll catch your death." The moment broken, Olivia rose from the bench. "You're right, Mrs. Holloway, I should go in." Zachary stood as well, reaching for his hat. "I'll see you both at church tomorrow if that's still all right," Olivia nodded, not trusting her voice. As she watched him walk away, his tall figure disappearing into the darkness, she realized with startling clarity that she was falling in love with Zachary Blackburn, despite all the reasons she shouldn't. The next morning brought a commotion that woke the entire boarding house before dawn. Shouts in the street, the pounding of hooves, and then someone hammering at their door. Mrs. Holloway, wrapping herself in her shawl, went to answer it, returning moments later with a pale face. "The Anderson gang has escaped," she announced to the bleary-eyed boarders gathered in the parlor. killed the deputy on watch, and fled into the mountains, the sheriffs forming a posse to go after them. Olivia's first thought was of Zachary. Would the sheriff suspect him of helping his old acquaintance escape? Would Zachary join the posse to prove his loyalty to Telluride? She got her answer hours later when a rider from the Chambers Ranch brought news that Zachary had indeed joined the posse, along with several other ranch hands. They had ridden out at first light, following tracks in the fresh snow. "Mama, will Mr. Blackburn be all right?" Samuel asked when she told him their Sunday plans would have to change. "Of course he will," Olivia reassured him, with more confidence than she felt. "Mr. Blackburn is very capable." For 3 days, there was no news from the posse. Telluride remained on edge, with men taking turns standing guard at the bank and the mine office, women keeping their children close to home. Olivia jumped at every sound, terrified that the outlaws might return to town, or worse, that Zachary might be injured or killed in the pursuit. On the 4th day, as dusk was falling, riders were spotted approaching from the west. The town turned out to meet them, Olivia and Samuel among the crowd. The posse looked exhausted, their horses lathered and their faces grim beneath layers of trail dust. Sheriff Taylor rode at the front, followed by 6 men including Zachary, his face bruised but his posture as straight as ever. Behind them, slung over horses, were 3 bodies covered with blankets. The 4th prisoner was alive but badly wounded, tied to his saddle and barely conscious. "They resisted," the sheriff announced to the crowd. "Opened fire on us from a cabin up in the high country. We got them all, but not without cost." He gestured to one of his deputies, whose arm was in a crude sling. Olivia's eyes were fixed on Zachary. When he finally spotted her and Samuel in the crowd, the relief that flooded his face was unmistakable. He dismounted stiffly, handing his reins to another ranch hand, and made his way toward them. "You're alive," Olivia breathed when he reached them, resisting the urge to throw her arms around him. "Promised Samuel I'd be at Sunday dinner, didn't I?" Zachary attempted a smile, though it was clear he was exhausted. Just a bit delayed. Samuel, less restrained than his mother, launched himself at Zachary, wrapping his arms around the cowboy's waist. "Did you shoot the bad men?" Zachary's face grew serious as he gently disentangled himself from Samuel's embrace. "That's not something to be excited about, Samuel. Taking a life, even a bad man's life, is never something to celebrate." The maturity of the answer, the genuine regret in Zachary's voice, confirmed for Olivia what she had already come to believe, that this was a man of principle, a man who understood the weight of actions and consequences. "You should get some rest," she told him, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the way he favored his injured leg more than usual. "I will. But I needed to see you both first, to let you know I was all right." Zachary's gaze lingered on her face. "If it's all right with you, I'll come by tomorrow, once I've cleaned up and had some sleep." Olivia nodded, her throat tight with emotion she couldn't express in the middle of the crowded street. "We'll be waiting." That night, as Olivia lay in bed, she thought about how close she had come to losing Zachary before she had even properly acknowledged what he meant to her. Life was fragile and uncertain. Hadn't Thomas's death taught her that? Yet here she was, holding back from happiness out of fear, out of a misguided sense of loyalty to a ghost. When Zachary appeared at the boarding house the next evening, freshly shaved and wearing clean clothes despite the dark bruise on his cheekbone and the careful way he moved, Olivia felt her heart swell with a joy she had almost forgotten how to feel. Mrs. Holloway tactfully took Samuel to the kitchen for a cookie, leaving Olivia and Zachary alone in the parlor. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the events of the past days hanging between them. "I was afraid for you," Olivia finally said. "I know, I'm sorry." "Don't be." You did what was right. She took a deep breath. Zachary, when I thought you might not come back, I realized I've been foolish, keeping you at arm's length out of fear. Zachary moved closer, his eyes never leaving her face. Fear of what? Of caring for someone who might leave. Of opening my heart again. Of letting Samuel become attached to another father figure who might disappear from his life. Olivia, Zachary said, his voice gentle, I'm not going anywhere, not unless you send me away. I don't want to send you away, she whispered. I want you to stay. Samuel needs you, and I need you too. The words, once spoken, seemed to release something in both of them. Zachary reached for her hand, his rough palm warm against her skin. Since the moment I saw you in the schoolyard, defending your son with the fierceness of a mountain lion, I've known you were someone special. And Samuel, he's the kind of boy any man would be proud to call son. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. He admires you so much. I admire him too. And his mother. Zachary's thumb traced circles on her hand. Olivia Evans, I'm falling in love with you. I think I've been since the first day when you recommended the Chambers Ranch to a dusty stranger in your kitchen. A laugh escaped her, watery with emotion. That was very forward of me. I'm grateful for it. And I'll be grateful every day if you'll give me a chance to prove myself worthy of you and Samuel. You already have, Olivia said. And then Zachary was leaning forward and she was rising to meet him, and their lips met in a kiss that felt like coming home after a long journey. Over the next few months, Zachary became an ever more present part of their lives. He moved from the ranch bunkhouse into a small cabin on the Chambers property, which he fixed up on his days off. He began teaching Samuel to ride on a gentle mare borrowed from the ranch, and he took Olivia on proper courtship outings, dinners at the hotel restaurant, a concert when a string quartet passed through town, even a picnic in the meadow above Telluride when the snow melted and the first wildflowers appeared. The town watched their courtship with interest, some with approval and others with skepticism. Mr. Porter remained convinced that Zachary was not to be trusted, though his warnings fell on deaf ears as Olivia grew more confident in her feelings and in Zachary's character. Billy Thornton and the other schoolboys no longer teased Samuel about being fatherless, not since the day Zachary had stood up in the schoolyard and claimed Samuel as his own. It was on a warm evening in May, with the aspens fully leafed out and the mountains still capped with snow, that Zachary asked Olivia to marry him. They were sitting on the porch of his cabin after a dinner he had cooked himself, Samuel having fallen asleep on a pallet by the fire inside. I know it hasn't been very long, Zachary said, holding both her hands in his, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Olivia. I love Samuel. I want us to be a family officially. Olivia looked at the man before her, so different from Thomas, and yet equally good, equally kind. She had worried once that loving Zachary meant betraying her first husband's memory, but she understood now that the heart was capable of holding both loves without diminishing either. Yes, she said simply. Samuel and I would be honored to become your family. The wedding took place in June, a simple ceremony in the Telluride church with Mrs. Holloway weeping happily in the front pew and Mr. Chambers standing as Zachary's best man. Samuel, proudly bearing the rings on a small cushion, couldn't stop grinning throughout the service. Do I call you Papa now? He asked Zachary at the small reception afterward, his expression serious despite the cake frosting on his cheek. If you'd like to, Zachary said, kneeling to look Samuel in the eye. But you can still call me Mr. Blackburn if that feels better to you. No matter what you call me, I promise to be the best father I can be to you. Samuel considered this for a moment, then nodded decisively. I want to call you Papa. My friend Billy says having a papa is important. Billy Thornton? Olivia asked, surprised. The boy had been Samuel's tormentor not so long ago. Yes, he's my friend now. He says I'm lucky because I got to choose my papa instead of just getting born with one. Samuel looked up at Zachary with pure adoration. And I chose the best one. Olivia saw the emotion in Zachary's eyes as he pulled Samuel into a hug. Over the boy's head, Zachary met her gaze, and the love she saw there made her heart feel too big for her chest. That night, after they had taken Samuel to his new room in the cabin that would now be their family home, Zachary held Olivia close as they stood on the porch, looking out at the stars that seemed to hang just above the mountain peaks. "Are you happy, Mrs. Blackburn?" he murmured against her hair. "Completely," she replied, turning in his arms to look up at him. "Are you? More than I ever thought possible." Zachary brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch reverent. "When I rode into Telluride last fall, I was looking for a place to rest, maybe to put down some roots. I never imagined I'd find a family. And I never imagined I'd love again," Olivia admitted. "After Thomas died, I thought that part of my life was over. I was focused on surviving, on giving Samuel the best life I could." "You did that," Zachary assured her. "He's a wonderful boy. Strong and kind, like his mother. And now brave and steady, like his father," Olivia added, seeing the pleasure her words brought to Zachary's face. "Our son." The years that followed were not without challenges. Zachary eventually saved enough to buy a small ranch of his own on the outskirts of Telluride, where they raised horses and cattle. The work was hard, the Colorado winters harsh, but the Blackburns faced it all together, their family growing with the addition of a daughter, Emma, born a year after their wedding, and later a son they named Thomas, in honor of the man who had first loved Olivia and given her Samuel. Samuel grew into a fine young man who inherited his mother's intelligence and his stepfather's sense of justice. Though he never forgot his birth father, he adored Zachary, following in his footsteps and eventually taking over the running of the ranch when Zachary's old injury began to bother him more in his later years. On clear summer evenings, Olivia would often sit on the porch of their ranch house, watching Zachary teach their children to ride or mend fences, and think about the twisting path that had led them all to this place of happiness. She thought of that day in the schoolyard when a tall cowboy had stood up for a fatherless boy, and how that single act of kindness had changed all their lives forever. "What are you thinking about?" Zachary would ask, joining her on the porch with 2 cups of coffee, his hair now streaked with silver but his blue eyes still bright with love. "About how lucky we are," Olivia would reply, taking his hand in hers. "About how sometimes the things we fear the most, like opening our hearts again, turn out to be the very things that save us." And Zachary would smile, that same warm smile that had first melted the ice around her grieving heart all those years ago, and say, "I'm the lucky one, Olivia. I found you and Samuel, and you made me whole again." In the small cemetery behind the Telluride church, a well-tended grave marked the resting place of Thomas Evans, first husband of Olivia and birth father of Samuel. And though life had moved forward, though love had blossomed anew, he was never forgotten. For in finding room in their hearts for Zachary, Olivia and Samuel had not diminished Thomas's memory, but had instead honored it by embracing happiness and building the kind of family he would have wanted for them. In Telluride, people still told the story of the day a dusty cowboy rode into town and changed the lives of a widow and her fatherless son. They told it as a testament to the power of love, of second chances, and of the family we choose rather than the one we're born with. They told it to remind their children that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is to open their heart when all they want to do is protect it. And on the Blackburn Ranch, where the mountains stood sentinel against the vast Colorado sky. A family built on love rather than blood lived out their days in the kind of happiness that only comes to those who have known sorrow and found the courage to love again anyway. As the years passed, and Zachary and Olivia grew old together, watching their children and then their grandchildren grow up strong and true on the land they had worked so hard to nurture, they often marveled at how a moment of courage in a schoolyard had led to a lifetime of joy. How a single act of kindness had created ripples that would continue long after they were gone. No man could ask for more than this, Zachary would say, his arm around Olivia as they watched the sun set behind the mountains that had been the backdrop to their love story. A good woman, fine children, and land that sustains us all. And a good man who was brave enough to stand up and claim a fatherless boy as his own, Olivia would add, leaning her head on his shoulder. That's where it all began. And that's where their story would continue, passed down through generations of Blackburns who learned from their ancestors that family is not defined by blood but by love, by choice, and by the courage to say, in the face of cruelty and doubt, "He has a father now."